making the sky glow green. The eerie color lasted for hours.
Suddenly, it can form a hurricane or trigger.
These people were just walking along the beach when suddenly thousands of fish started showing up on the shore.
The whole world is turning its attention to Jerusalem right now. Just minutes ago, unusual reports began spreading from the ancient city where thousands of years of history and prophecy intersect. But what is sending chills down many people's spines is not happening only in Jerusalem. Along distant coastlines, large numbers of fish have suddenly washed ashore, as if something deep beneath the ocean has been disturbed. In other places, the sky has turned strangely dark, and witnesses report black rain falling to the ground. There are even areas where thunder and lightning crash across the sky, yet not a single drop of rain falls. And in some regions, the sky has suddenly shifted into an unusually deep shade of blue, leaving many people staring upward in silence and unease. If you find stories like this fascinating, I'll make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and join us as we uncover what may really be happening. It began like any other ordinary day. The streets were busy, shops were open, and people moved through their routines without thinking that anything unusual was about to happen. Cars passed through the intersections, children walked home from school, and the rhythm of daily life continued exactly as it always had. But then, little by little, something above the city began to change. At first, only a few people noticed it. Someone paused while walking down the street and glanced upward. Another person stopped near a bus stop, squinting at the sky as if trying to understand what they were seeing. The color of the sky was shifting. Instead of the familiar pale blue of the afternoon, the sky slowly deepened into a shade far darker than usual. Within minutes, it transformed into a deep, almost electric blue that seemed to stretch endlessly across the horizon. The change was subtle at first, but soon it became impossible to ignore. The strange blue light spread across the city, casting an unusual glow over everything below. Buildings, windows, and even the streets began reflecting the color above them. Glass towers shimmered with a deep cobalt tint, while rooftops and walls seemed to absorb the eerie light. For many people, the city suddenly looked unfamiliar, as if the world had quietly stepped into a different atmosphere. Pedestrians began stopping in the middle of sidewalks. Drivers slowed their cars. People stepped out of shops and offices just to look upward. Phones came out almost instantly. Within minutes, videos began appearing online. Footage showed the same deep blue sky stretching across neighborhoods, captured from balconies, rooftops, and city streets. Some clips showed crowds standing still, all staring upward in silence. One resident who filmed the moment later said, "I looked up and thought maybe a storm was coming, but the sky didn't look like any storm I've ever seen. It was just this deep blue color everywhere. Everyone around me stopped walking." Another witness described the moment with clear unease. For a second it felt beautiful, but then it started to feel strange, like the sky wasn't supposed to look like that. The atmosphere across the city began to change. The noise of traffic and conversation faded as more and more people noticed the sky. Some stood quietly with their phones raised, and recording the strange color above them. Others simply watched, unsure what to think. On social media, the video spread quickly. Comments began appearing beneath the footage. Some people called it a rare natural event. Others were not so sure. One comment that quickly gained attention simply asked, "Is this just a strange sky or the beginning of something?" In moments like this, people often turn to words written long ago, searching for meaning in events that feel unusual or unsettling. One passage that some shared online came from the book of Luke. "There will be signs in the sun, the moon and the stars, and on the earth distress of nations." Luke 21:25. Whether people saw the sky as a warning, a mystery, or simply an unusual sight, one thing was clear. The city no longer felt ordinary. The deep blue color remained stretched across the sky, unmoving and silent, while thousands of people continued to watch and record what they were seeing. No one could say how long it would last, and no one seemed completely certain what it meant. But as strange as the sky had become, it would soon become clear that the sky was not the only unusual sign appearing around the world. Something else had already begun happening far from the city streets, and it was unfolding along the edges of the ocean. People had barely finished talking about the strange, deep blue sky when another wave of unsettling videos began spreading across social media. At first, many viewers thought the footage had to be fake. The clips showed long stretches of coastline covered with fish. Thousands of them lay scattered across the sand, and their bodies reflecting the light as waves rolled slowly behind them. Some were completely still, while others were still moving weakly, flipping against the sand as if they had only just been forced out of the water. The images spread rapidly across the internet. Many of the videos were filmed by people who had simply gone out for a quiet walk along the beach that morning. What they expected was the familiar sound of waves and empty sand. Instead, they found the shoreline covered with fish. In some places, the fish stretched across the beach in long lines where the tide had pushed them ashore. The waves continued to move in and out, and with each movement, more fish appeared along the edge of the water. The sight stopped people in their tracks. Some walked carefully across the beach, looking down in disbelief. Others simply stood still, staring out toward the ocean as if trying to understand what they were witnessing. What made the moment even more unsettling was the kind of fish lying on the shore. Among the thousands scattered across the sand were species that fishermen rarely see near land. These were fish that normally remain far out in deeper waters, far from beaches and shallow tides. Yet now they were appearing along the shoreline, and the reports were not coming from just one place. Within hours, similar videos began appearing from other coastlines, different beaches, different countries, but the same strange scene, fish scattered across the sand, as if the ocean itself had pushed them out. People began asking the same uneasy question. Why were so many fish suddenly leaving the sea? Many people have long believed that animals can sense danger before humans do. And throughout history, stories have been told of animals behaving strangely before earthquakes, storms, or other disasters. Because of that belief, the images of thousands of fish lying helplessly on the shore created a growing sense of fear. If the creatures of the ocean were fleeing the water, people began wondering what they might be trying to escape. Across the beaches where the videos were filmed, the atmosphere became strangely quiet. People who had gathered to see the fish walked slowly along the sand, their eyes moving between the shoreline and the horizon. The ocean itself appeared calm. The waves continued their slow rhythm, rolling toward the shore exactly as they always had. Yet the sight of the fish made that calm surface feel unsettling. It was as if the ocean was hiding something beneath it. Just as the videos continued spreading across the internet, some viewers began sharing ancient words that seemed to echo the unease people were feeling. One passage that appeared again and again came from the book of Hosea. The fish of the sea will be taken away. Hosea 4:3. For some people watching the videos, the words felt disturbingly close to what they were seeing unfold. Thousands of fish lying on the shore, an ocean that suddenly felt mysterious, and a world already shaken by the strange blue sky above. One question continued to spread across the internet. What could have driven them out of the deep ocean? For the moment, no one had an answer. But what would soon appear on the open water would make the sight of fish on the sand feel like only the beginning. Because far beyond the coastline, something enormous was already moving through the ocean. And when people finally saw it, fear would spread even faster than the videos. For many people who had watched the videos of fish covering the beaches, one thought kept appearing again and again. Animals often sense danger before humans do. For centuries, stories have been told about creatures behaving strangely before great disasters. Birds suddenly leaving the sky, dogs howling in the night, fish fleeing the depths of the ocean. At first, many people dismissed the idea. They believed the strange blue sky and the fish on the shore were simply rare and unrelated events. But in Jerusalem, a land many consider sacred and watched closely by the world, the atmosphere was already filled with unease. People were still discussing the strange sky when, only a few days later, something began happening far out over the water. And this time, it could not be ignored. It started quietly. Along a distant coastline, a few people standing near the shore began looking toward the horizon. At first, nothing seemed unusual. The ocean looked calm, the waves rolling slowly under the sunlight. But then someone noticed something strange. Far out at the edge of the sea, a dark line had appeared across the horizon. It looked almost like a shadow stretching across the water. At first, it seemed too distant to understand. Some people thought it might simply be a cloud reflection or an unusual wave far offshore. But as the minutes passed, the line began to grow. Slowly at first, then faster. The strange line across the water began rising higher and higher. What once looked like a distant shadow started forming into something much larger. People standing along the beach began pointing toward the horizon. The ocean itself looked as if it were lifting. The shape moving across the water did not look like ordinary waves. It did not break or roll the way normal waves do. Instead, it moved forward as one massive rising wall. And then people began to realize what they were seeing. It was not a wave. It was a wall of water. A massive tsunami was moving toward the shore. The realization spread through the crowd almost instantly. Voices rose in panic as people began shouting warnings to one another. Within seconds, the calm atmosphere of the beach shattered. People dropped what they were carrying. Some grabbed their children. Others simply began running without looking back. The ocean, which had looked peaceful only moments before, now appeared enormous and unstoppable. The wall of water continued growing as it approached the coastline. From a distance, it looked like the sea itself had risen into the air. The water stretched across the horizon, moving with terrifying speed toward land. The sound of the ocean began to change as well. What had once been the gentle rhythm of waves turned into a deep roar. A powerful rumbling noise rolled across the shoreline as the massive body of water pushed forward. People ran across the sand, their footsteps scattering in every direction. Some stumbled while trying to escape. Others turned back briefly, staring in disbelief at the approaching wave. It was impossible to ignore now. The ocean itself was moving. The enormous wall of water continued closing the distance between the horizon and the shore. Each second it appeared larger, taller, more overwhelming. The beach that had been peaceful only minutes before was now filled with panic. Shouts echoed across the sand. People pointed toward the water while urging others to run faster. The tsunami advanced relentlessly. Closer, closer, closer. The surface of the water rose like a moving mountain, its height towering above the waves that had once seemed so ordinary. In that moment, many people remembered the strange signs that had appeared just days earlier. The deep blue sky, the fish scattered across the beaches, and now the ocean itself rising in a way few had ever witnessed. Some people would later say that the moment felt almost unreal, like as if the world had suddenly shifted into a different chapter. But for those standing on the shoreline, there was nothing unreal about what they were seeing. A massive wall of water was rushing toward them, and with every passing second, it was getting closer. Dui jai la joan ketkua, part ba janjuak noi tu nien voi noi dung ban yukao. The massive wall of water continued rushing toward the coastline, its size growing larger with every passing second. The roar of the ocean filled the air as people ran desperately across the sand, trying to escape the unstoppable force moving toward land. For those who witnessed the moment, it was something they would never forget. An ocean that had looked calm only minutes before was now rising like a moving mountain of water. And as the wave advanced closer and closer to the shore, the one question began echoing in the minds of many who later watched the footage around the world. What force could move an ocean like this? Yet even as the ocean unleashed its terrifying power, the strange events surrounding the world were far from over. Because what would soon happen in the sky would leave many people even more unsettled. Not long after the terrifying images of the rising tsunami began spreading across the internet, people in another part of the world noticed something unusual happening in the sky. At first, it seemed like an ordinary storm was approaching. Dark clouds slowly gathered overhead, stretching across the horizon and gradually swallowing the light of the sun. The air grew heavy and quiet, the kind of stillness that often comes before rain. People looked up, expecting a normal downpour. And then the rain began to fall. At first, the drops seemed ordinary as they touched the ground and the roofs of nearby buildings. But within seconds, something about the rain felt different. The water was not clear. As the rain continued falling, People began noticing the color of the droplets landing on their cars, sidewalks, and clothing. Instead of the usual transparent water, the rain appeared dark, almost black. In some places, it looked like deep gray streaks falling from the clouds. In others, it left dark stains wherever it landed. Drivers stepping out of their cars stared at the marks spreading across their windshields. People walking outside held their hands out under the rain, only to look down in confusion at the strange dark liquid touching their skin. Soon the realization spread quickly. This was not ordinary rain. The droplets left dark smudges on the pavement. Cars parked along the streets began showing streaks running down their windows. On rooftops and sidewalks, the water pooled into dark patches that stood out against the surface beneath them. People began raising their phones, filming the strange rainfall. Within minutes, videos started appearing across social media. Clips showed dark rain falling under the heavy clouds, leaving visible marks wherever it touched the ground. Some recordings focused on hands held under the rain, showing the unusual color of the water dripping down fingers. Others captured entire streets slowly becoming stained by the falling drops. The images spread rapidly. Across the internet, people began using the same phrase to describe what they were seeing: black rain. The name quickly stuck. But soon thousands of viewers were watching the footage, trying to understand what exactly was falling from the sky. The mood in the areas experiencing the rain became increasingly uneasy. People stood beneath awnings and building entrances, watching the dark droplets strike the pavement. Some stepped cautiously outside, curious but uncertain. Others simply stayed indoors, looking out through their windows as the strange rain continued falling. The sky above remained thick with dark clouds, and the rain did not stop immediately. Instead, it continued falling steadily, leaving behind more streaks and stains across the city. The atmosphere grew heavier with every passing minute. The streets that were once filled with ordinary activity now felt strangely quiet. Conversations slowed as people focused on the sky above them. For many, the moment felt unsettling. Just days earlier, the world had watched the sky turn a deep, unnatural shade of blue. Soon after that, thousands of fish appeared along the shorelines. Then came the terrifying sight of the ocean rising into a massive wall of water. And now the sky itself seemed to be releasing rain that looked nothing like normal rainfall. Standing beneath the dark clouds, many people found themselves staring upward, trying to make sense of what they were witnessing. One question quietly spread through the growing wave of videos and messages being shared online. Why would rain fall from the sky in such a color? But as strange as the black rain appeared, the sky was not finished revealing its mysteries. Because soon after the dark clouds began to move away, another unsettling phenomenon would appear above the horizon. And this time, it would come with the sound of thunder. Not long after the strange black rain began fading and the dark clouds slowly drifted across the sky, many people believed the unsettling events might finally be over. But the sky was not finished. Across several regions, the clouds thickened again, spreading across the horizon like a dark blanket. The sunlight faded, and the air became strangely still. Then, from far in the distance, a low rumble rolled across the sky. Thunder. At first it sounded faint, like a distant storm somewhere beyond the hills. People looked up, expecting to see rain begin falling again. But the rain never came. Instead, another rumble followed, this one louder than the first. Moments later, a sudden flash of light tore across the clouds. Lightning. The bolt streaked through the sky in a brilliant line, one illuminating the dark clouds for a brief moment before disappearing again. Buildings, rooftops, and streets below glowed white for a split second before darkness returned. Then the thunder came again. Louder this time, the sound echoed across the city, rolling through streets and neighborhoods like a deep, powerful drumbeat. People stepped outside their homes and workplaces, looking upward. Another flash of lightning split the sky, and then another. The lightning continued appearing again and again, bright streaks of energy cutting through the dark clouds above. Each flash lit up the horizon, revealing the thick layers of cloud hanging over the city. Yet something about the storm felt wrong. Despite the thunder and lightning, the air remained completely dry. No rain fell. People held their hands out instinctively, expecting droplets to follow each thunderclap, but nothing touched the ground. The sky roared with the sound of thunder, yet it released no rain. The strange storm continued for several minutes. Each bolt of lightning lit up the sky like a sudden explosion of light. The thunder followed seconds later, shaking windows and echoing between buildings. The entire sky seemed alive with flashes of electricity, but the streets remained dry. As the storm continued, people began gathering outside, staring upward at the unusual scene unfolding above them. Some stood silently in the streets. Others watched from balconies and rooftops. Phones were raised once again as people recorded the strange event. The atmosphere felt heavy. It was not just the sound of thunder or the sight of lightning that unsettled people. It was the silence between each thunderclap, the strange stillness of the air, while the sky continued flashing above. It felt as if something powerful was happening high above the clouds, yet the earth below remained untouched. Across social media, videos of the dry thunderstorm began spreading quickly. Clips showed lightning bolts tearing across the sky, while the ground below remained dry and silent. The strange sequence of events that had already captured the world's attention now seemed even more mysterious. First, the sky had turned an unnatural deep blue. Then thousands of fish appeared along the shores. Soon after that came the terrifying sight of the ocean rising into a massive tsunami. Then black rain fell from the clouds, and now the sky roared with thunder while no rain fell at all. Standing beneath the storm, many people felt a growing sense that something unusual was unfolding across the world. Not a single moment on its own seemed impossible, but together, the events created a pattern that was difficult to ignore. As the thunder echoed across the sky once more, and another flash of lightning illuminated the clouds, many people watching the videos later found themselves asking the same question. Why would the sky roar without releasing rain? When people began looking back at everything that had happened, the sequence of events felt difficult to ignore. It started with the sky. A normal day suddenly turned strange when the color above the city shifted into a deep, intense blue. Unlike anything people had seen before, streets, buildings, and glass windows reflected the unusual light. And thousands of people stopped what they were doing just to stare upward. Not long after that, the next strange sign appeared along the shores. Videos began showing fish scattered across beaches, thousands of them lying across the sand. Some still moved weakly as the waves rolled in behind them. Many of the fish were species rarely seen close to land, which only deepened the mystery of why they had suddenly appeared there. Then came the ocean itself. Far out on the horizon, the calm surface of the sea began to change. A distant line across the water slowly rose higher until people realized they were looking at something terrifying. A massive wall of water moving toward the shore. The tsunami turned peaceful coastlines into scenes of panic as people ran from the rising ocean. Soon after, the sky revealed another strange moment. Yes, dark clouds gathered and rain began to fall, but the droplets that touched the ground were not clear. Instead, they carried a dark color that left stains across cars, streets, and rooftops. The images of this black rain spread quickly across the internet, leaving many people unsettled. And then the sky roared once again. Thunder rolled across cities while lightning tore through the clouds above. The flashes lit up the horizon again and again. Yet despite the thunder and lightning, no rain fell from the sky. 5 events: the deep blue sky, fish on the shore, a rising tsunami, black rain falling from dark clouds, thunder and lightning without rain. Each of these moments, taken by itself, might seem like a rare but natural occurrence. But when people placed them side by side, many began wondering whether they were simply coincidences. Or throughout history, humans have always watched the natural world closely. Long before modern technology existed, people looked to the sky, the sea, and the behavior of animals as possible signs of what might come next. Whether those beliefs were correct or not, one truth has remained the same. When nature behaves in ways we do not expect, people begin asking questions. And that question now continues to echo across conversations and videos around the world. Are these simply rare events, or signs that the world is changing in ways we do not yet understand?
What really lives beneath the ocean's surface?
Appearing and disappearing. It all felt unreal. Then, one tiny glowing orb drifted down near the ground.
Across America, the tranquility is being shattered in strange ways. Frozen lake, silent and still, suddenly exploded, ice bursting apart with a sound like a cannon beneath the earth. Not long after, flocks of birds that once traced the sky with perfect order bent their paths mid-flight, turning away from routes followed for generations. The horizon, once steady, filled with thick, heavy clouds that sagged low, swallowing light and pressing down on the land. And when night fell, a bright spiral ripped across the darkness, twisting open above quiet roads and sleeping towns. It was not chaos in the usual sense. Scientists offer many explanations. But as season erupts, wings shift, skies darken, the night itself seems to tear. Some are beginning to wonder, are these merely natural phenomena or warnings we should heed? If you believe the signs around us deserve to be viewed through a spiritual lens, stay connected and follow along as we explore them in the light of biblical truth. Across several northern regions, people were pulled from sleep by a sound that did not belong to spring. Winter had loosened its grip. Snowbanks were shrinking. Sunlight lingered longer in the evenings. The world was supposed to be softening. But instead of gentle thaw, the season opened with violence. Just before dawn, frozen lakes began to explode. There were no storm alerts, no earthquakes on record, no construction blasts scheduled near the water. Yet, without warning, a deep, cannon-like boom tore across the surface of the lakes. The sound rolled outward for miles, echoing through quiet towns. People rushed to their windows expecting to see smoke. Instead, they saw ice splitting apart. Thick sheets that had covered the lakes all winter suddenly fractured in long, jagged lines. Some cracks shot from one shoreline to the other in seconds. In certain places, the entire sections of ice heaved upward before collapsing inward. Witnesses described sharp flashes as sunlight struck the newly opened fissures, making it appear for a moment as if the lake itself had sparked with light. Scientists later explained the phenomenon in simple terms. As temperatures rise quickly in early spring, the ice sheet begins to warm unevenly. Beneath it, meltwater shifts. Pressure builds silently between expanding ice and trapped water. When the tension reaches its limit, the frozen surface cannot hold together any longer. It fractures violently, releasing energy in a sudden, thunderous crack. Technically, it is a natural process. Rapid warming, structural stress, sudden release. But what made this spring different was the intensity and frequency. Multiple lakes across different states split within the same warm spell. Ice that had seemed solid for months failed in minutes. What looked stable was only temporarily restrained. For some who study scripture, the image lingers. Spring is often described as renewal, but renewal sometimes begins with rupture. When ice breaks, it releases power that was trapped beneath restraint. It reminds us that what is hardened can shatter, that what is silent may not be at peace, that warmth does not always arrive gently. It can trigger collapse. It forces us to acknowledge that the stability we rely on can change more quickly than we expect. The whisper of the sky after the ground failed overhead. Many assumed it was simply a passing geological event. But while their foot were still staggering, the air creatures were quietly telling another story, quieter, yet just as unsettling. In recent seasons, birdwatchers and farmers began noticing something unusual. Flocks that had followed the same paths for generations were changing direction. Instead of flying south along familiar routes, some turned east. Others broke formation and moved north at the wrong time of year. The sky, once patterned by predictable migration lines, looked confused. These were not small groups. Long ribbons of geese curved across the horizon, then slowly bent away from their known course. Cranes circled as if searching for a signal that never came. Songbirds arrived weeks early in places unprepared for them. In other regions, they did not arrive at all. People stood in open fields watching the formations shift. Hunters lowered their binoculars. Elderly residents who had marked seasons by the sound of wings whispered that something felt off. Migration had always been a sign of order, a living calendar written across the sky. Biologists offered clear reasons. Changing temperatures alter wind currents. Storm systems disrupt air patterns. Habitat loss forces birds to seek new resting grounds. The Earth's magnetic field, which many species use for navigation, can fluctuate slightly. Instinct adapts. Roots adjust. On paper, it makes sense, but watching the sky rewrite itself leaves a mark. Because when the patterns written in the sky begin to bend, it reminds us of something simple and strong. The Old Testament speaks directly to this image. In Jeremiah 8:7 it says, "Even the stork in the heavens knows her appointed times, and the turtle and the crane and the swallow observe the time of their coming. But my people know not the judgment of the Lord." The message is clear. Order can shift. And when it does, those who are watching will feel it first. Days after, the sky began to look different. Powerful storm systems moved across several states. Lightning flashed in the distance, but that was not what people focused on. It was the clouds. Thick masses formed overhead, sinking into large, rounded pockets that hung low and heavy. The sky did not seem open anymore. It looked swollen, pressed down. Late afternoon light turned dim and strange, as if the air itself had thickened. These formations are known as mammatus clouds. They appear when cold, dense air sinks from the base of strong thunderstorms. They are often seen before or after severe weather. Uncommon, but recorded. They form when unstable air, sharp temperature changes, and layers of moisture collide high above the ground. From a scientific view, the cause is straightforward, but understanding does not remove the feeling. When the sky seems to droop, when huge pouches hang overhead like weighted shadows, instinct reacts faster than reason. People step outside and stare upward. Phones come out. Photos are taken, voices lower. Many say the same thing. Something feels off. It is not only the shape, it is the size. The sense that the sky, once wide and steady, has grown heavy. Scripture often links thick clouds with moments of great power. Exodus 19:16 describes thunder, lightning, and a dense cloud covering the mountain as it shook. The message in that image is clear: strength, authority, warning. If the land can break because of stress building out of sight, and the air above can reshape into something so unfamiliar, what pressures are rising between them? What is forming below and above, while daily life moves forward as if nothing is shifting? Maybe these are only natural cycles, pressure building, pressure releasing. Yet they do not feel random, they feel connected, like steps in a pattern still moving forward. And what people saw in the night sky after those clouds drifted away disturbed them even more. And just when the heavy clouds finally cleared, the night sky brought something no one was ready for. At first, it was a thin streak of light cutting across the dark. It was not a falling star, not the steady blink of a plane. This light moved with purpose. It slowed. Then it began to turn. The line curved into a wide, glowing spiral, spinning outward into a bright swirl that looked almost intentional, like a gate opening above the earth. Cars stopped along highways. Drivers stepped out and stared. Porch lights flicked on across neighborhoods. People stood in silence, phones lifted, breathing shallow, eyes fixed on the sky. For long seconds, the spiral hung there. It grew wider, its edges glowing blue and white against the deep black night. Then, pieces of fire broke away, streaking downward in fading lines. The sky did not simply flash, it seemed to peel back. Later, officials gave a clear answer, a rocket re-entering the atmosphere. As parts of the spacecraft fell back to Earth, friction with the air ignited leftover fuel. The spinning motion created the spiral shape. Rare, but understood. A mix of technology and physics. On paper, the event is easy to explain, but the image is harder to forget. Revelation speaks of the stars of heaven falling to the earth. For centuries, fire falling from the sky has stood as a sign of judgment, upheaval, and divine power. So when bright fragments burn overhead and the heavens appear to open, something ancient stirs in the human mind. Today, human machines can create sights once linked only to prophecy. A rocket falling can look like stars dropping from the sky. A trail of burning fuel can resemble a doorway in the heavens. The line between the natural, the engineered, and the symbolic grows thin. That is where the tension remains. If human hands can produce a vision that mirrors end times imagery, how quickly can understanding blur? When fire spins above and the sky seems to tear apart, it pushes a deeper question. Are we seeing only metal and fuel? Or are we being reminded how fragile our sense of stability really is? Because if one night the sky opened for reasons beyond science and design, would we know the difference? Or would we tell ourselves it was just another launch, another explanation, until the moment passed beyond our control? If the spiral in the night sky unsettled people, what formed days later on the Mississippi River forced many to stare into moving water with new fear. Along wide stretches of the Mississippi River, witnesses began reporting strange circles spinning on the surface. Not small ripples from passing boats, not the brief churn of a tug's engine. These were large, dark whirlpools that seemed to open without warning. They formed fast. Calm water suddenly tightened into a spinning ring. The center dipped lower, pulling leaves, foam, and debris inward. The current twisted into a deep funnel, wide enough to make even experienced boaters cut their engines. The river did not rage, it rotated, slow, strong, focused. Barges reduced speed. Fishermen gripped their rails. Some said the water looked as if it were breathing, drawing in, then tightening further. The surface darkened at the center of each vortex, as though the river were revealing a deeper layer beneath. Then, just as suddenly, the whirlpools weakened. The circles stretched, thinned, and faded back into the broad current. But the feeling remained. River authorities later pointed to shifting currents. Spring runoff had increased water volume. Underwater ridges and sudden depth changes can redirect flow. When opposing currents collide, rotation forms. It is fluid dynamics: pressure, movement, release. On paper, it is simple. But watching the river spin changes something. For generations, rivers have symbolized life and stability. Towns rise along their banks. Trade flows across them. They appear steady, predictable. Yet beneath the surface, powerful currents move unseen. When those hidden forces align, the surface gives way. The Old Testament often describes waters as symbols of chaos and power beyond human control. In Psalm 69:2, the writer cries, "I sink in deep mire, where there is no standing. I am come into deep waters, where the floods overflow me." The image is clear: water that pulls, overwhelms, and reminds humanity of its limits. When whirlpools open on a river as familiar as the Mississippi, They interrupt the illusion of control. Satellites map its curves. Engineers measure its depth. Ships travel its length daily. Yet a sudden vortex can still form without warning, twisting the surface into something unstable. And that is what lingers. If a river that seems steady can suddenly tighten into spinning funnels, what unseen currents are moving beneath the surface of our world? What pressures are circling out of sight, waiting for the right alignment to break through? Because when water begins to turn in on itself, it reminds us of something ancient. The surface may look calm, but the depths are always in motion. When strange events catch public attention, ground splitting in the cold, the sky forming odd shapes, and fire crossing the night, rivers turning wild, birds shifting course, or the mind finding patterns in chaos, many believers turn to the Bible. Not to chase dramatic theories, but to ask a steady question. How does Scripture describe a world that feels unstable? From the first pages, the Old Testament shows creation as ordered and held together by God. Genesis 1 repeats a clear rhythm. God speaks, and it is so. Light separates from darkness. Land rises from water. Boundaries are set. The world is not random. It is formed with purpose. Yet the same scriptures show that creation is not fixed in stone. Psalm 100, 225-26 says, "The earth and the heavens were made by God's hands. Yet they will perish. They will all wear out like a garment." The image is simple and strong. Even the sky can grow old. Even the ground can change. The Bible does not hide this movement. Psalm 46, 2-3 speaks of the earth giving way and mountains falling into the sea, of waters roaring and foaming. The picture is intense, land shifting, waves rising. But the focus of the passage is not panic, it is refuge. God is our refuge and strength. The shaking of the world points to the steadiness of God. When Scripture talks about shaking, it often signals change. In Haggai 2:6, the Lord says, "I will shake the heavens and the earth and the sea and the dry land." Every realm is named: sky, land, water. Shaking can mean judgment. It can mean cleansing. It can mean transition. But sometimes what is unstable must move so that what lasts can stand out clearly. The sea, especially in the Old Testament, represents power and mystery. In Job 38, 8-11, God asks who shut in the sea behind doors and set limits for its waves. The message is direct. The waters are strong, but they are not without boundary. Psalm 93:4 declares, "Mightier than the thunders of many waters, the Lord on high is mighty." The roar of nature is real, but it is not ultimate. Fire carries meaning as well. Malachi 3, 2-3 describes the Lord as a refiner's fire, purifying silver and gold. Fire tests. It burns away what is weak and reveals what is true. It is not only destruction, it is exposure. Even human perception is addressed. Proverbs 4:23 warns, "Guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." The heart and mind can shape what we think we see. Jeremiah 17:9 reminds readers that the heart can be deceptive. Discernment matters. Not every sign carries a message. Not every fear carries truth. At the same time, the Old Testament balances warning with comfort. Isaiah 26:4 says, "Trust in the Lord forever, for the Lord God is an everlasting rock." In a world where mountains can move and waters can rise, the image of a rock stands firm. Psalm 121:2 adds, "My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth." The one who formed the shifting world is also the source of help within it. Scripture does not promise a world without disturbance. It shows floods, droughts, wars, and trembling ground. But again and again it repeats a deeper truth. God remains sovereign over what moves. When believers face a season that feels uncertain, earth shifting, skies changing, waters stirring, patterns breaking, the Old Testament does not call for denial or hysteria. It calls for awareness, for trust, for steady hearts. The world may wear out like a garment, the waters may roar, the mountains may tremble, but the purposes of God stand firm. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and keep an eye out for our next video. Leave a comment and let us know what you think.
We're going to start this hour with that developing news out of Jerusalem. 5 people
No
have...
one's opened this door in over 4,000 years.
Oh my God. Jesus.
Just minutes ago, the sky above Jerusalem stopped looking normal. There was no warning, no sign that anything was about to happen. The videos quickly went viral, leaving millions asking the same question. Is this just a coincidence or a sign of something greater? Before we go further, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below, because what you think about this might be more important than you realize. That afternoon feels ordinary at first. The city moves as it always does. Traffic flows slowly under fading light, and the sky hangs above like a background no one pays attention to. Then something changes. The clouds begin to stretch into long, thin lines, twisted as if an unseen force is pulling them gently apart. They do not look like storm clouds. They do not move like normal clouds before rain. They seem almost still, yet the shapes suggest slow movement, like something shifting just beyond clear sight. A light appears between them. It does not flash, it does not race across the sky. It simply stays there, silent, steady, impossible to ignore. People begin to notice. Heads lift, phones rise. Within minutes, videos start spreading online from different angles, different streets, different cities. The light changes slowly as the sun sinks lower. White fades into pale blue, then into a soft trace of violet. It is not bright enough to frighten anyone, but strange enough to hold attention. The longer people watch, the quieter the moment feels. Explanations appear almost immediately. Some call it an atmospheric effect. Others say it is light bending through ice high above the clouds. A few insist it is only an illusion created by the angle of the sun. The internet fills with theories faster than the light itself changes. But the sky remains silent, and the light lingers just long enough for everyone to feel they are witnessing the same moment together. Strangers looking up, sharing something they cannot quite explain. Then it begins to fade. There is no clear ending, no sudden disappearance. The color softens, the edges blur, and slowly the light is gone, as if it was never there at all. The clouds shift with the wind and return to familiar shapes. The sky becomes ordinary again. Yet something feels different. Across the city, people keep replaying the videos, pausing frames, zooming in, searching for details they might have missed. The moment passes, but the question remains. An ancient line once said, "There will be signs in the sky." No one says it out loud. Still, the thought lingers. Not as an answer, but as something unresolved. Night settles in. The sky goes quiet. Online debates continue, videos keep spreading, and explanations keep coming. But what remains is not certain. Only the quiet feeling that something appeared just long enough to be seen and vanished before anyone truly understood what it was. The sky returned to normal, but the questions did not disappear. And somewhere else, beneath layers of ancient stone, another mystery remained quietly waiting to be seen. The place lies deep within an archaeological site known for many years, far from the noise of the city. The path leading there is narrow, winding between massive rocks shaped by time, their surfaces worn smooth by wind and dust. Some say this area once belonged to an ancient temple. Others believe it may have been the entrance to a forgotten cave system. No one can say for certain. At the center of that space stands a massive stone door. It doesn't immediately draw attention. Its color blends almost perfectly with the surrounding rock, and only when standing close do the unusually straight edges become visible, signs that it may have been shaped by human hands. The surface is smoother than the stone around it, yet there are no carvings, no clear markings, no obvious symbols. Just a silent slab of stone, standing as if it has existed longer than anyone can remember. What makes it strange is simple. The door has no lock, no bars, no chains, no visible mechanism sealing it shut. At first glance, it looks like something that should open with enough force. But reality says otherwise. Over the years, several research teams have tried to examine it, measuring, scanning, studying every edge, even using modern equipment to analyze what might lie behind it. The result has always been the same. Nothing clearly blocks it, and yet it does not move. One witness who once joined a survey team recalled, "You stand in front of it, and you feel it's a door, but the longer you look, the more you wonder if it was ever meant to open at all." No one knows what truly happened in the past. Perhaps the immense weight of the stone caused it to lock itself in place over time. Perhaps geological shifts altered its structure. Or perhaps, from the very beginning, it was never designed for people to pass through. Throughout history, stone doors appear again and again in significant places. Temples, tombs, sacred caves. A door is never just an entrance. It marks a boundary between outside and inside, between what is known and what remains hidden. And its presence alone invites a question: what lies beyond? An old biblical line once said, "Knock, and the door will be opened to you." The words do not serve as an explanation for the stone before them. They exist only as a passing thought, a quiet parallel between something visible and something still out of reach. Time continues to pass. Sunlight shifts across the surface of the stone, shadows moving slowly before disappearing as evening approaches. People come and go, all each carrying their own theories, but the door remains unchanged, silent, unmoving, offering no answers. Perhaps that silence is what makes it unforgettable, not because of what it reveals, but because of what it refuses to reveal. And the longer one stands in front of it, the simpler the question becomes. Are all doors meant to be opened? Or are some doors created only to remind us that there are limits we have not yet crossed? Even now, no one knows whether that stone door was designed to open one day, or to remain closed forever. No one remembers exactly when the fog began. Some said it appeared just after sunrise. Others insisted it arrived within minutes, swallowing the entire area before anyone realized what was happening. But every account shared the same feeling: suddenness. There was no warning, no gradual change. One moment the air was clear, and the next, everything vanished into thick white silence. The place was an ancient site, its old stone structures standing quietly against time. At first, the fog moved low along the ground, thin enough to ignore. Then it thickened rapidly, climbing higher until even the tallest stone columns began to disappear. Familiar paths faded into pale emptiness. People could no longer see where the road ended. There was no wind, no loud sound, only a silence that grew heavier by the second. Those who were there began speaking more quietly, as if instinct told them not to disturb whatever had settled around them. Sound changed. Footsteps felt closer than usual, yet voices failed to travel far. Someone called out to a friend, but the words seemed to stop halfway, swallowed by the air itself. Visibility dropped to only a few steps ahead. Shapes moved inside the fog, blurred figures appearing and disappearing without warning. At times, someone would see a silhouette right in front of them, and then blink, only to find empty space. One witness later said, "I turned to look for my friend who was only a few meters away, but suddenly I wasn't even sure where I was standing anymore. It felt like everything had been erased." The fog made time difficult to measure. No one knew how long they had been inside it. Minutes or longer? Watches kept moving, yet the feeling was different. Space seemed stretched, movement slowed, and even breathing sounded louder than usual. The ancient stone walls, once solid and familiar, became nothing more than fading outlines. They no longer looked like ruins. They looked like shadows of something distant, something half-remembered. People began to feel as if they were not just walking through fog, but through overlapping layers of time. At one moment, someone stopped and stared into the white emptiness ahead. Later, he said it felt like he was waiting for something to appear, though he had no idea what. And an old biblical line says, "He made darkness his covering." No one spoke those words at the time. Yet inside the thick fog, many felt the strange sense that something was being hidden, not as a belief, but as a quiet feeling that settled in without explanation. The air grew colder. Moisture clung to hair and clothing, making everything feel heavy. People slowed their pace, speaking less and less. Every step became careful, as if moving too quickly might cause them to lose their way entirely. Then, just as suddenly as it arrived, the fog began to change. No one noticed at first. The light simply felt slightly stronger. Shapes slowly returned. Figures stopped dissolving into shadows. The stone walls regained their familiar edges. Sound began to travel again. Within minutes, the fog was nearly gone. Everything remained exactly where it had been. The stones, the pathways, the ancient remains. Nothing had changed. There was no trace that anything unusual had happened, and anyone arriving later would never understand why those who were there stood so quietly afterward. And yet, something felt different. What stayed behind was not what people had seen, but what they had not seen. A brief moment when the familiar world disappeared, leaving everything uncertain and fragile. When the fog finally cleared, the landscape was the same as before. Only those who stood inside it knew that for a short stretch of time, the place had become something else entirely. A silent space no one could fully explain, and no one was certain they truly understood. Change does not always begin with a loud sound. In many different places, the first moments often feel strangely similar. A familiar street, a neighborhood that has existed for years, life moving as usual, until the ground suddenly changes. Not slowly cracking, not shaking with warning. It simply disappears. The surface collapses within seconds. Asphalt, soil, sometimes even vehicles, slide downward into an opening that seems to appear from nowhere. People nearby often have no time to react. There is no moment to fully understand what is happening, because by the time they realize it, the familiar shape of the place is already gone. Large holes appear in different locations, each with its own shape. Some are nearly perfect circles, as if the earth had been carefully carved away. Others have broken edges, layers of soil falling inward to form deep, uneven walls. Seen from above, they look like sudden gaps interrupting what once felt continuous and stable. What makes these events difficult to accept is not only their size, but their suddenness. A road used every day can vanish in an instant. A space once considered safe becomes a deep opening visible from far away. One witness recalled, "I heard a short, deep sound, and then the ground in front of me just dropped, like someone had pulled it away."
This is being watched a lot online, a video of a man being rescued from his car, trapped in flash floods.
Jerusalem began the day like any other. Pilgrims moved through the ancient streets, and prayers echoed across the holy city. But within hours, the sky began to change. Thick clouds gathered quickly, powerful winds swept through the streets, and thunder rolled across the hills. Soon, heavy rain turned roads into rivers. As the storm passed, people noticed something strange. Clouds that looked like giant wings, a mysterious object moving silently in the sky, and floodwaters, revealing what appeared to be an ancient tomb hidden beneath the ground. Are these just rare events, or something more? If you find this story interesting, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. The moment the storm reached Jerusalem, it did not arrive quietly. The sky turned dark with shocking speed. Massive clouds rolled across the city like a moving wall, swallowing the sunlight that normally shines over Jerusalem's ancient stones. Within minutes, the bright afternoon had turned into something that felt closer to night. Then the wind exploded across the city. It came with terrifying force, roaring through the narrow streets and sacred hills like a powerful surge of air. Trees bent violently under the pressure. Branches snapped, and leaves were ripped from their limbs, spinning wildly through the air. Market tents flapped uncontrollably as vendors rushed to grab ropes and poles before the wind could tear everything away. Dust, debris, and loose objects began flying through the streets. The gusts became so powerful that some people struggled just to walk. Doors slammed shut, metal signs rattled against buildings, and the sound of the wind echoed between Jerusalem's ancient stone walls like a warning. Residents began looking toward the sky with growing concern. One man standing near a shop doorway later said, "I've lived in Jerusalem my whole life, but I've never felt wind like that. It sounded like the sky itself was roaring." Then the thunder began. A deep rumble rolled across the hills surrounding the city, vibrating through the air like distant drums. But within seconds, the sound grew louder. Thunder cracked again and again across the sky, echoing between buildings and shaking windows throughout entire neighborhoods. Then lightning split the sky. A blinding flash tore through the clouds, lighting up Jerusalem in a burst of white light. For a brief second, the Golden Dome, ancient rooftops, and stone streets were illuminated like daylight. Then darkness returned. Another flash followed, and another. Lightning began striking again and again, jagged streaks tearing through the clouds above the city. Each strike was followed by thunder so loud that people could feel the vibration in their chests. The sky seemed to be unleashing everything at once, and then the rain came. Not as a gentle shower, not even as a normal storm. The rain crashed down violently, as if the sky had suddenly opened. Massive drops pounded against rooftops, cars, and pavement with incredible force. Within seconds, the entire city was drenched. The sound of the rain was deafening. Water poured down in thick sheets, bouncing off the ancient stones that have stood in Jerusalem for thousands of years. Streets began to glisten under the relentless downpour, as rivers of water rushed along the edges of narrow roads. But the storm was only getting stronger. The wind continued howling through the city, pushing the rain sideways. Visibility dropped quickly as the downpour intensified into a wall of water falling from the sky. Lightning kept flashing. Thunder kept exploding. Again and again, the sky roared above Jerusalem. The scene reminded some people of ancient words recorded in Scripture. The Lord thundered from heaven. The voice of the Most High resounded with hailstones and lightning. Psalm 18:13. Within minutes, parts of the city began to flood. Water rushed across streets, covering sidewalks and pooling in low areas. Cars slowed as drivers struggled to see through the storm. People ran toward doorways, balconies, and any shelter they could find. Others simply stood and watched, because something about this storm felt different. Many residents later said the speed and violence of the weather felt almost unnatural. The wind, the thunder, the relentless rain, all of it seemed to arrive at once, as if the sky had suddenly unleashed its full power over the city. And as lightning flashed once more across the dark clouds above Jerusalem, a quiet question began to spread among those witnessing the storm. Was this simply an extreme storm, or the first sign that something far more mysterious was about to unfold? Even after the worst of the wind had passed, the storm over Jerusalem was far from finished. The thunder slowly moved farther away, but the rain refused to stop. Heavy clouds continued hanging over the city, releasing wave after wave of rain that poured steadily onto the ancient streets below. What had begun as a violent storm was now turning into something longer and more exhausting. Hour after hour, the rain kept falling. At first, the water simply ran along the sides of the roads, flowing through gutters and small drainage channels. But as the rain continued, the city's drainage system began struggling to keep up with the sheer amount of water falling from the sky. Jerusalem's streets, many of them old and narrow, were never built for storms this intense. Slowly, the water began to collect. Puddles spread across sidewalks, water gathered at intersections and low areas between buildings. In places where the streets dipped slightly downhill, the rainwater began moving faster, flowing through the city like small streams. Before long, several roads were partially covered in water. Cars drove cautiously, their tires pushing waves outward as they moved. Some vehicles slowed almost to a stop as drivers tried to see through the steady rain. The sound of water splashing against pavement echoed through the streets. Pedestrians rushed for shelter beneath balconies, shop entrances, and bus stops. The rain continued beating down on rooftops and ancient stone walls, creating a constant roar across the city. In certain neighborhoods, water began creeping into doorways and small ground-level spaces, forcing shop owners to push water back out with brooms and buckets. One resident standing beneath a covered walkway later said, "The rain just wouldn't stop. It felt like the sky had opened and forgotten to close." Emergency crews moved through several parts of the city, checking flooded intersections and helping guide traffic away from the worst areas. In a few streets where the water had gathered more deeply, responders helped move stalled vehicles to safer ground. The situation wasn't catastrophic, but it was enough to disrupt the city. Water rushed down stairways and along sidewalks, carrying leaves, dust, and small debris through the streets. Storm drains gurgled loudly as they struggled to swallow the relentless flow of rainwater. All around Jerusalem, the steady downpour created a strange atmosphere. The city looked different. Ancient stones glistened under the rain. Narrow alleys reflected flashes of distant lightning, still flickering beyond the clouds. The familiar sounds of the city traffic, conversation, footsteps, had been replaced by the endless rhythm of rain, striking rooftops and pavement. It was as if the entire city had paused under the weight of the storm. Moments like this often remind people how fragile human systems can be when confronted by nature's force. Even with modern infrastructure and preparation, powerful storms still have the ability to slow entire cities. As one passage from Scripture describes the power of rising waters, "The floods have lifted up, O Lord, the floods have lifted up their voice, the floods lift up their pounding waves." Psalm 93:3. Eventually, after what felt like an endless stretch of rain, the storm finally began to weaken. The downpour softened. The thick clouds slowly started to break apart. Light began returning to the sky above Jerusalem, filtering through the thinning gray clouds. People stepped back outside, looking upward as the storm gradually lost its strength. But as the rain faded and the sky slowly opened again, something unusual began to appear above the city. High in the clouds, a strange formation was beginning to take shape, something that many people would soon start recording and sharing across the world. If this story made you think, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments what you believe really happened. Was it just a coincidence, or something more? As the storm slowly faded, Jerusalem began to emerge from the chaos. The heavy rain weakened, the thunder rolled away toward the distant hills, and the violent wind that had shaken the city only hours earlier finally began to calm. Gradually, the thick storm clouds started to break apart, allowing beams of sunlight to pierce through the sky. The ancient stone buildings of Jerusalem, still wet from the storm, reflected the returning light. People stepped outside carefully, looking at the soaked streets and the quiet that followed such a powerful storm. But before long, many of them began looking upward. Something unusual was forming in the sky above the city. High above Jerusalem, the clouds were gathering into shapes that did not look ordinary. One enormous cloud formation stretched across the sky, wide and striking. As sunlight pushed through its edges, the outline became clearer. It looked almost like two massive wings spreading outward. The center of the cloud appeared brighter and thicker, while both sides curved outward in layered patterns that resembled feathers. From the ground, the formation looked astonishing, as if giant wings had appeared above the ancient city. People began pointing toward the sky. Conversations stopped. Some simply stared in silence, trying to understand what they were seeing. The longer the clouds drifted slowly across the sky, the clearer the shape seemed to become. Many observers said the formation looked incredibly symmetrical, stretching across a large section of the sky above Jerusalem. Then, another cloud formation slowly appeared nearby. This one looked even more unusual. As the light shifted behind it, the shape began to resemble the outline of a tall figure standing upright. The upper part of the cloud appeared rounded like a head, while two long extensions stretched outward from the sides, almost like arms reaching across the sky. The figure-like shape seemed to stand between the massive wing-shaped clouds drifting behind it. Within minutes, people began pulling out their phones. Cameras pointed toward the sky from streets, rooftops, balconies, and courtyards across Jerusalem. Tourists and residents alike began recording the moment. Some stood quietly filming, while others reacted with disbelief as the clouds slowly moved across the horizon. The strange formations changed slightly as the wind carried them forward, but the shapes remained clear enough to leave many people stunned. One woman who recorded the moment could be heard saying, "Look at that, it really looks like wings. I've never seen clouds form like that before." Others nearby repeated the same words, whispering to each other while keeping their eyes fixed on the sky. Some people simply stood still, watching as the clouds drifted above the ancient city. The moment quickly spread beyond Jerusalem. Videos of the cloud formations began appearing online within minutes. Soon, people around the world were watching the footage, replaying the clips and zooming in on the shapes that had appeared above the holy city. Many viewers pointed out the massive wings stretching across the sky, and the figure-like outline standing between them. For some, the sight immediately reminded them of ancient words written in Scripture. One passage from the Bible describes the heavens in powerful imagery. "Look, he is coming with the clouds, and every eye will see him." Revelation 1-7. Another verse speaks of the presence of God moving through the sky. He makes the clouds his chariot and rides on the wings of the wind. Psalm 104:3. For those watching the sky over Jerusalem that day, the image of wings formed in the clouds above one of the most sacred cities in the world felt deeply symbolic. The storm had shaken the city with thunder and wind only moments earlier, and now the sky seemed to display a peaceful yet mysterious formation drifting quietly above the hills. People continued watching and recording, unsure of what to think about the strange shapes above them. Some felt awe, others simply stood in silence, absorbing the moment as the clouds slowly moved across the sky. But while everyone's attention was focused on the wing-shaped clouds drifting above Jerusalem, someone suddenly noticed something else moving through the sky, something small, dark, and clearly not part of the clouds. Within seconds, cameras began turning toward this new mystery, appearing high above the city. While people across Jerusalem were still filming the unusual cloud formations drifting above the city, something unexpected suddenly caught someone's attention. At first, it was only a small detail barely noticeable against the bright sky. One person filming the wing-shaped clouds noticed a dark shape moving slowly among them. The person zoomed in with their phone camera, trying to see it more clearly. Within seconds, others nearby began pointing upward as well. Something was moving through the sky, and it did not look like a cloud.